we're often the ones doing and they're just watching. And that can certainly be comfortable for both parties, but it's not going to give them the fastest growth to feeling comfortable.
All right, Doug and Pat back again with another episode of the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur. And in this episode, we're going to unpack management. We're going to talk about building a team. We're going to talk about leading a team. So, Doug, kick us off.
So I think at this level, it's important to understand that the team is what is going to allow you to scale, right? Like, we can talk the operational side, but it's really because we chose a service business, it's the people that you have on your team that are going to deliver the service that allow you to have your ideal role. Where I start with the team is determining your ideal business size and number of clients, model that you want to operate. And ballpark, certainly not a hard etched in stone number, but ballpark, how many team members do you want, right? Because there's a difference between leading a team of 3 versus leading a team of 10. And generally speaking, once you cross that 5 to 6 number is when you really are probably a full-time leader and not doing anything but maybe marketing and leading. So that's a choice, and certainly a good problem, but still a problem. And so having some version of the seats on the bus, right? EOS would call it the accountability chart, but some version of what are the positions that I want on my team. And I may fill all those positions myself right now. I may have all those hats right now, but what are the positions on the team? And what are the roles and responsibilities of those positions? We want to start there rather than this reactive, like, I need to go hire this person to fill in this little gap. That is certainly necessary at the early stage, but at this stage, when you're really looking to scale, you want to define. I always use sports analogies a lot with team because they're a great example of, they have the positions defined, right? They know they need a quarterback at the draft. So they're not looking at somebody that plays wide receiver if they know they need a quarterback. However, within that quarterback position, there's different personalities, there's different unique skill sets, there's costs associated with different quarterbacks, etc. Understanding first what are the positions you want on your team and what are the roles and responsibilities you want them to play is the first kind of, it's not a box to check, but it's the first step I would take with building your ideal team.
Yeah, I think that we almost, by default, as a startup, we go through that, hey, I'm wearing every hat, but we likely want to graduate out of that, almost everybody. The thing that I would tell you that as a leader, even if, and Doug, you may have a different viewpoint on this, I think historically I've always thought of team, even including contractors and vendors. I think of, like, man, I'm going to need an accountant. That accountant has to meet certain criteria, right? I have to manage a relationship with this accountant. Not the same way that I manage a relationship with a trainer who works the morning shift, but I'm still responsible as a leader for managing that relationship, not just paying to advocate the responsibility.
For sure. Yeah, we think of, especially in the training gym, it's going to be, if you have somebody do your ads, right? That's certainly somebody that's you want to have clear, defined, good, healthy relationship, clear, defined roles and responsibilities. If you're having anybody do any marketing, and then of course, maybe more your financial team, like a bookkeeper, accountant, etc. If we speak maybe to some tactics, because I think if you're listening to this, you probably already have a team member or at least are aspiring to. Once you define the roles and responsibilities, we want to obviously move to how are we recruiting and how are we onboarding. So recruiting is something, again, using the sports analogy, that happens every day, and we're always having our kind of ears and eyes open for if there was somebody that would be a good fit for our team. We want to have that list to go to. I'm also well aware that we're not a funded company where we can just hire freely, and just because somebody's a good fit, we're going to hire them. We still need to, maintain a lean team most of the time, but we don't want to have that panic button that if we get that text from a team member that they need to talk and that ends up meaning they're moving on and graduating, ideally we have this list that we can go to. So that would be one recommendation, is always be recruiting, whether that's within your network. Certainly we love the hospitality business. We're always trying to connect with people that in the hospitality business have the personality. And if you can find that hospitality minded person that has a passion for fitness, that's like a dream come true, because the hospitality business has the opposite awful hours, if that makes sense. They tend to have really late nights and weekends, which in the fitness business is extremely, when you take like a young waitress or a bartender, if they don't have kids, it's fine. But as soon as they start having kids, that's really stressful for their family. That's one very specific recruiting tactic that I would share, is we are very aware of the hospitality businesses and looking for people that want, I wouldn't even say an upgrade, but a different transition, a lateral move where they're certainly not going to probably make more, but they're going to have a better lifestyle where weekends aren't super heavy, maybe Saturday mornings in the training gym, something like that, but it's certainly not late night Saturdays, late night Sundays. And then weekdays, they may have to do an evening shift or an early morning shift, but it's an upgrade from the schedule. I think my point is that the hospitality personality, being able to balance, if you think like balancing multiple tables at a restaurant, balancing a bar of people that need different things, that's very applicable to being able to manage a small group. And when we recruit, I know the default is to go recruit people that have fitness experience, and that's certainly a benefit if you can find that. But in today's market, certainly pursue those recruiting efforts, but also be open to taking somebody that's passionate about fitness, passionate about helping people, and teach them your system. So that's my angle on recruiting.
I think that historically, coming from a background working in a university setting, working in collegiate athletics, I definitely also leaned on that as a recruiting avenue, right? Because I think that I liked bringing in people with an athletic background because they had some practical experience in a training environment. It wasn't just textbook knowledge. They were accustomed to off-peak hours. They were not people who traditionally had always fit into a 9-to-5 box. Early mornings to catch the bus for a game, practices before class, or weight room stuff before class. And frankly, they in many ways had to embrace the earn what you get mentality, because the scoreboard kind of told the story. In sports, everybody, like the table stakes are, everybody practices, everybody works out, everybody has to meet a certain academic kind of benchmark to be eligible. And if you want to get on the field, it's competitive. If you're competing not only externally against a opponent in a competition, but you're competing internally for playing time. So I looked at those traits, and then the other place that we recruited probably successfully that is an untapped opportunity is we recruited a lot of clients who had exited the workforce, stay-at-home moms that were ready, once the kids hit school age or something, they were ready to get back into an adult environment, but they weren't ready to go back to their full-time position. And then they had another income in the household that had already been able to be the lion's share of what was needed to support their quality of life, so they could choose something that may be a little bit more lifestyle friendly and not have to maybe earn as much as they earned earlier in their life.
For sure. If we think of the next phase, okay, so we got some recruiting happening. Now we have somebody come into our ecosystem and we go through the interview process and we decide that they're a good candidate. We're going to onboard them. And onboarding is something that doesn't need to be much more formal than having a kind of curriculum of sorts, where if you think of a college course, there's going to be 12 weeks of the course, and each week there's this topic, this chapter to read, this assignment, etc. So we think very similar with our onboarding with our team is, if you're bringing somebody in, let's say as a part-time role, they're working 15 hours a week and they're working 3 days a week, 5-hour shifts. I would probably devote an hour of that time to classroom setting where they are with you or whoever is doing the onboarding and they're studying the material. That could be your exercise library, that could be your programming philosophy, that could be your client retention system, your session standards, right? Whatever your modules are, each week for, say, generally speaking, 8 to 12 weeks, you have a theme behind that week. So we build it out where week 1 is the vision, the strategy, the overall mission of the company. And week 2 goes into session standards, which is here's what a really good session looks like. And so there's the classroom piece, which is teaching, looking at maybe your systems, maybe watching some Loom videos. You're there to answer questions, you're there to support, you're there to teach. But then I'm well aware in this business, they're not going to hang out in a classroom for 15 hours a week for 12 weeks. Generally, as a ballpark, we like 10% of their schedule in the first 90 days to be towards that classroom setting. So 10% for a full-timer, 4 hours, maybe an hour a day. But for a part-timer, you don't have the luxury of spending multiple hours a day with them. That might be an hour once a week. That time should be scheduled though. So going back to that example where the trainer is working, say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from, let's say, 3 to 8 p.m., maybe you don't schedule anything on the floor with them from 3 to 4. So they're still scheduled 3 to 8, but on Monday, it's training time with you. It's on their schedule. They're still coming in at 3, but from 3 to 4, you're working with them. So that's how we think of the classroom side of it or the teaching side of it. And then there's on the actual training floor, assuming we're hiring trainers, this would be at the desk or at the computer with an admin where they're actually doing the thing. Right? They're actually doing it. And I think that is often in our industry, maybe other industries, forgotten about that. We learn by doing. We learn by, we talked about sports earlier, like we learn in practice. Yes, we want to watch film, but then we want to go practice what we just watched in film. And so the learn by doing, I think, is something that oftentimes when we are with a new employee, a new team member, we're often the ones doing and they're just watching. And that can certainly be comfortable for both parties, but it's not going to give them the fastest growth to feeling comfortable. What's going to give them the fastest growth to feeling comfortable operating in your business is doing the thing. So certainly giving them a space where you can teach it to them. Like we have a show, tell, do. So we're going to show it to them. We're going to tell them how we want it done, and then we're going to watch them do it so that they have the role playing and that kinesthetic learning that goes on with it. So that's broadly speaking how we think about onboarding is you got 10% classroom, 90% of it is just learn by doing, and then slowly over time, obviously they build up the confidence, you build up the confidence with them where they can take on their own schedule, or if they're an admin, take on their own tasks within the business.
I love that. I think that, again, coming from a competitive athletics background, you can give somebody a playbook, you can sketch things out on a whiteboard, whatever else, but you got to run the plays, right? Like you have to practice to get comfortable and confident in doing something. And it's been a proven approach or model in that kind of athletics landscape for forever. And it works the same here too. If you want somebody to be better at something, let them practice it.
For sure. I think to wrap, I would say, how do you, we don't want to fall into the trap of onboarding a team member and then throwing in the towel and saying they're good, right? So onboarding is certainly time intensive. It's a commitment both on their end and on your end. But we want to build a rhythm of training, a rhythm of development with a team member, because hopefully, especially if they're in this space, they're always learning and they're always trying to get better. And that's what makes a really strong team member is they want to be a part of your thing and they want to continually get better, just like we all do as entrepreneurs. And so having a rhythm for this practice, having a rhythm for this training. So some practical, more tactical things that we do are a team meeting rhythm. So if you do have a team generally of more than 3 to 4, you ideally want to find a time, even if it's to start once a month, where you get together, There's a cultural benefit of being together because training is very chaotic to some degree in a team where you're working in the morning, but you hired an afternoon trainer. So after onboarding, you really don't see each other. Maybe you're just texting, or you're running 2 sessions and one coach is over there and one coach is on the other side of the gym. And so there's not a lot of time in our industry where trainers get to bump shoulders together. There's the cultural benefit of a meeting, even though that term can get a bad rap, but we use those meetings to practice. We use those meetings to practice the plays. That could be here, today we're gonna practice what happens if you're here by yourself and somebody walks through the front door and you're coaching a session. Let's practice what we do during that scenario. Somebody walks in and they injured their shoulder playing pickleball this weekend. What are we all doing? Let's make sure we're all approaching that the same way. So generally we do ours weekly, but you can start monthly. Each week just has a scenario, a practice to play, or play to practice, and just something to role play. But again, I think that the biggest takeaway with this is making sure that they're actually practicing and you're not just talking to them in the room. So team meetings are a big component that certainly has the group feel. The other thing that we like to do ongoing is one-on-ones with each team member. So this doesn't need to be anything formal. In fact, it's best done when it's casual. There's a rhythm of, we call them roadmaps, where every 6 months or so, just take them out to coffee, take them out to lunch, and have a nice conversation for how are you liking the job, how's life, where do you see yourself next year? Some of these more intimate, I guess, for lack of better terms, conversations that you can't really have day to day, but it's expected. That's probably my biggest takeaway I would stress with that is it's not, hey, next week, let's grab coffee. And now they're feeling on their heels, there's maybe something wrong. And instead, it's expected every 6 months, we're going to do a roadmap session. And this is your opportunity, both of our opportunities to get together in a somewhat casual environment, but also a strategic conversation of, are you liking your role? What is your ideal role? Where do you see yourself? Anything I can do to support you? So that's big picture. And then week to week, we love the 515s. And this doesn't have to be a big commitment. The 515s, it comes from a form that should ideally either be no more than 5 questions or take no more than 5 minutes to fill out. We use just a simple Google form for it. And it's just a recap of the week. How was your week? Any wins? Any scenarios you ran into? We use the term rocks in the shoe, like anything bothering you. It doesn't have to be big. The key is the rhythm of it. So they fill it out every week. It's just part of their end of week cadence and the cadence of filling it out every week. You can get to a level if you have, again, going back to that 5 to 6 number where you're playing almost probably full-time manager or leader. You can get to a point where those maybe have an in-person component where on Friday they fill it out and Monday you do a quick little huddle to use the form as a conversation starter. But even to begin the process, just getting team members to check in each week, the biggest tip I can give with that is understand that it's every week and they don't have to feel sometimes if it's not introduced with this context, that this is just a weekly accountability check-in for both of us. It doesn't need to be like this vomit of information about how life is, because not that they just feel stressed out by that. It can feel stressed. Every week has to be something, when in reality it could be like, awesome week, high five, great. It's just a kind of that speed bump for us to slow down and say, how was the week? Anything we need to troubleshoot that week. So those are a couple things that we look at with ongoing team development.
Yeah, and I think the 2 big takeaways for me with that, one is just the consistency of it, right? If you want to strengthen any relationship, whether it's a coach-client or a leader-coach type of relationship, there's got to be some consistency to it. So you've used the word rhythm a few times. Just those regular check-ins, I think, not only allow for you to strengthen the relationship, but it also means that when you do reach out, it's not like panic mode because they're like, oh, what's the problem? What's the matter? And then the other thing you touched on was role playing. I think that role playing is one of the things that I feel like was always the hallmark of staff trainings from day one in businesses that I've owned, because it comes back to some of the sports stuff. It feels a little bit like making the practice tougher than the game, because if you're role playing and you as a leader you're the person they're role playing with, You know the answers to the test. You know what they're supposed to do. So there's a little more pressure on them. Whereas when they get out there in the environment with the clientele or the prospect or whoever they're interacting with, those people don't have a preconceived understanding of how this conversation is supposed to go or what their response is supposed to be or how they're going to navigate a training session. So by practicing in an environment that's a little bit more challenging, it takes a lot of the pressure off. It makes what they're doing on the floor so much easier. And so the interaction or the experience is so much better. So, man, a lot to cover there in management. And obviously we could go deeper and deeper into this, but I think that's one of the fun things we get to do in venues like Boardroom is you get to dive into somebody's unique situation and customize some of these things to the business they have, the model they operate. So another episode of the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur in the book.